You know, people seldom go to the trouble of scratching the surface of things to find the inner truth.
You're here because you know something, that there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there.
Truth is stranger than lies. From deep inside the rabbit hole, here's your host, David Weiss.
And I'm Patricia Steere. Welcome to Truth is Stranger Than Lies. We have a special guest and a couple of special topics today. Our guest, David Weiss and I, is Nick Davies. He's originally from the UK, and he now lives in Phuket, Thailand. He has a YouTube channel called Phuket Word and a website, phuketword.com. And Nick, thanks for being here with us from Thailand.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Well, I do want to let everyone know that David Weiss, Next is his middle name, for those in the know, is suffering a bit from some laryngitis today. So there may be some coughing fits or something happening.
Well, they'll be on mute, but I am here and I will talk when I can.
Okay, fantastic. All right, Nick, let's find out a little bit more about what got you into the world of flat Earth. And then I want to discuss a gentleman that all three of us have been listening to on YouTube recently and how that has affected all of us. So Nick, flat Earth, how did it come into your life?
I suppose like most other people, it was there was one particular YouTube video which kicked it off, followed by a few more recommendations, and that was it. I was just gagging for more every day, and soon enough, I think, like a lot of people that spend time just whether it's YouTube or Facebook. I haven't interacted much with Facebook as far as Flat Earth goes, but just on YouTube, and I suppose like most people, you spend a lot of time listening to what the different things people have to say, and then started trying out some of these things myself. I suppose it wasn't a case of trying to debunk the flat Earth. It was a case of trying to see if what the flat earthers were saying had any validity, and
Nick,
started looking at the horizons.
I want to make a comment on that. A lot of people that are hearing about flat Earth for the first time, and they're like, "Oh, you heard it on YouTube," but they're debunkers out there. Their favorite argument is, "Oh, you heard it on YouTube. Oh, it must be true." Well, the truth about YouTube is everything is on YouTube. Everything real, everything fake, and everything in between. So, it's just like reality. You have to sort out what's real and what's not real. And it's not about believing. It's about listening and actually using your brain rather than the indoctrination that we've gone through in the indoctrination system that we call school.
Absolutely. It's all about discernment, isn't it? We're all familiar with the comments that people think flat earthers are trashing science or ignoring. Ignorance is the favorite word, or whatever. That's completely untrue. It's more of a case of actually looking properly for the first time, maybe. I know that I never really understood the movements of the moon, for example, until really taking a hard look at it. So I can understand from someone who's defending the globe. You can understand their position, because if they are someone that has examined and observed the moon and the stars with the presupposition that what we're taught is true, and it all fits and it all works to the heliocentric model, then you can understand when someone comes along and says, "Well, hang on a minute, you can look at it this way as well." I think that was the first step. Is the first thing you see once you start looking at it is, wow, you can look at this in a number of different ways, and you still get the same results. So, as Brian Cox once famously said, it's only because you're told that you're on a globe that you believe it, and because there's nothing else around us, or everything around us can say so many things, can be interpreted in so many ways. And I think that's the one thing I'd love to see in these people that come along, and even if they could just say, "Well, yeah, that's interesting. You could say that we orbit the moon, and we wouldn't really be able to tell the difference. Something like that.
All three of us were affected quite recently when we both, or all three of us, stumbled across a video by a man who's well known for his interest in psychopathy, sociopaths, serial killers, and cults. His name is Thomas Sheridan, and he's been around quite a long time. He's out of Ireland, and he's got a great channel where he devotes his time to uncovering the dark side of humanity, and a lot of truths are told on that channel. But he's recently, well, going back to about 10 months or so ago, come out with a bunch of videos, or a couple of videos anyway, talking about how basically stupid Flat Earth is. And he had a Yuletide message over the holidays. And it was, I don't know, I think about 45 minutes or something of basically just hammering Flat Earth and talking about how ridiculous it is, and talking about how Flat Earth is a kind of a Russian plot that we Flat Earthers are in on, whether we like it or not. And the whole thing really blew me away. I mean, I know, David, you feel the same way. We all found ourselves making comments on to each other and on other videos pertaining to this. And well, we decided to talk about that, all three of us here today. David.
I woke up New Year's Day to somebody had messaged me that a ball earther, prominent one, and I watched it, and I was like just blown away. I'm like, oh my God, there's so many problems with this. But then I clicked on my YouTube subscription link, and there was Nick's response, along with another one from Nathan Oakley. And that made me feel a lot better that their thoughts were exactly my thoughts.
Yeah, and Thomas Sheridan himself won't allow comments on his video, so all three of us would have met up there anyway, making comments if we were able to. And they would have been kind comments, of course, encouraging him to actually look into Flat Earth. That's the big problem here. He writes it off as being ridiculous and makes many comments about the fact that, well, we all, especially women like myself, should know that we live on a ball Earth because, of course, the Earth itself is Gaia, and it's round like a pregnant woman's stomach. It's round like breasts, round like nipples, round like ovaries. Well, I guess you guys can think of something that it might be round like. I don't know why he kept focusing on women, but that's what I was thinking. But Nick, what did you think when you heard Thomas Sheridan say these things?
Yeah, it was striking. It's rare that I would venture to actually talk about any one person in particular in a video. I know it kind of, you're preempted. You kind of get that pre-gret because you know things are going to happen when you start calling out names. But having seen at least, I think, 2 or 3 tirades by Thomas Sheridan, it was... having waited to see if he would actually investigate it a little bit more, it was just very curious to, as you say, I have been a regular listener of his for the same reasons. I mean, the expose he did on people like Jimmy Savile, and the complete sense he made of the whole situation there was brilliant, very 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 insightful, and. It's very strange when and obviously we've seen it happen to a few other people who are kind of big in the truth movement, where they've revealed a lot of truths and been very perceptive, but then when it comes to the flat Earth, suddenly, boom, there's this, you get the same old behaviors, the same old reaction, the knee-jerk reaction that you get from majority of people that will attack flat earthers, and you do see the pattern where there's always this assumption. There's this assumption that you haven't looked into the science, you haven't looked into astronomy, or you haven't looked into physics, and it's like, no, flat earthers don't just come out and make videos for the hell of it. I mean, it's a coming out, isn't it? Really, it's like. It's only when you're really sure that there's something to this that you start making videos and start, risking being laughed at and ridiculed. But there's always this assumption that we just completely ignore all the science. And you could tell that was, just by listening to Mr. Sheridan, you could tell that there was this belief that he held, his predisposition, as we said, about the Earth being round. Because of...
He also says many times in his video that the flat earthers believe the Earth is a disc, which leads you to the perception, of an edge where boats sail off, like everybody's seen. And that's not the case. That's not the model that I believe in.
Right.
One of the worst things that I found about what he was saying was he was encouraging flat earthers to drop flat Earth at the risk of potentially being in danger. He was saying that the whole flat Earth thing is secretly run by some kind of Russian intel that's been put in place to discredit NASA. And he went on to say pretty much that NASA was valid and praised the Pluto mission, when they did the Pluto flyby, and was pretty much saying that a flat earther who stays involved with flat Earth, like all three of us will someday potentially wake up with a gun in their hand after or before committing a, kind of a mass murder situation. David?
Or perhaps there'll be a fake shooting where they have a fake shooter and they'll claim that he was a flat earther, or they'll set up, an online personality to be a flat earther. You don't know if it's a real person or not, and then they'll just frame him like they do everything else.
Well, those last two things are way more possible than the first scenario that we're speaking of, that he spoke of, which would be one of us actually would be kind of, I guess, mind controlled. That's kind of what he was referring to, that we are, quote, so gullible that, to believe in flat Earth, that we could potentially be somebody who would commit an atrocity like that. Well, we're here on Talk Network on Truth is Stranger Than Lies, talking with Nick Davies of the YouTube channel Phuket Word. And we're going to continue talking about Thomas Sheridan, a person that we admire in many ways, and in some ways we actually hope he looks further into certain things, flat Earth being one of them. I'm Patricia Steere. It's David Weiss and Nick Davies here, and we will continue this conversation in just a minute here on Talk Network.
I like that.
And welcome back to Truth is Stranger Than Lies. It's Patricia Steere and David Weiss and our special guest, Nick Davies of Phuket Word on YouTube. And he's from Phuket, Thailand. And we're all three here together talking about our favorite subject, David, flat Earth. And we're kind of bringing in a little bit Thomas Sheridan, although we don't want to make the whole show about him. And I want to let everyone know we are not bashing the man. He's done a lot of great work on psychopathy, serial killers, and he's really revealed a lot of truths. And we respect him for that, but he has been slamming flat Earth going back to about 10 months as of the date of this recording, calling flat Earthers clowns and saying a lot of things in his most recent New Year's Eve, I think it was New Year's Eve, YouTube video that's available now to view that are just completely false. The thing, Nick, about the flat Earth and about all of these truths that people who are doing deep research have unveiled is that these things have been right in our faces all of this time, and we've never noticed it. I mean, it's like, we were talking off camera, like you were saying, like the way the money system works, like the way taxes work. The next thing they're going to tell us is we don't really need to breathe oxygen. That's a fallacy as well. Don't you feel that's going to be next?
Well, yeah. You're going to get taxed on breathing out carbon dioxide, eh? Yeah, I suppose that was another thing with Mr. Sheridan and the kind of the surprise that he doesn't make that final connection, because I think, personally, and I think it's the same for a lot of people that get into flat Earth, they've been researching various conspiracies and for maybe several years, and they've listened to a run of people or alternative news people, and of course had to be discerning at the same time. I mean, you can get carried away with the fear and the paranoia that you're constantly being spied upon, or things are going to collapse any minute. There's so the alternative news movement seems to be full of that as well. A lot of fear-mongering as well, and that seems to be a bit contagious. And I do remember myself, maybe a few years ago, getting, not obviously feeling fairly disconnected from it here in Thailand, but thinking, oh my God, everything's just going to collapse in, the next minute. And of course, what Flat Earth does for you is makes you realize that no, it's not. No, it's not. We're on a solid foundation where everything is fine. Everything's just fine.
There's no Planet X, no giant asteroid coming to kill us, and there may be small things that occur, and things happen all of the time, but none of these big things that they've been scaring us with all this time. So it does give you a feeling of security, not a false sense of security, but they've been trying to bait us with fear, and I fell into it around the September 23rd of 2015 a little bit, thinking all these signs were pointing towards some huge thing happening, a created thing, but a thing nonetheless. And ever since that happened, that time came and went, I've pulled back and said, wait a minute, I'm a flat earther. I mean, there's nothing to fear here but fear itself, really, to paraphrase. David?
It was a very similar story with me, and that's why I don't get angry at these people. I understand. I was researching 9/11, Sandy Hook, Boston, and all of the other deceptions out there, and Flat Earth was put in front of me. I ignored it for 6 months, deleting comments, not even looking at videos, refusing to look, just like, a normal, sane person would do, because you have to draw the line somewhere at ridiculous. But then I looked, and just like you, I needed more and more and more, and I'm still looking for more and more, and I'm open to the truth. If the truth can show me that the Earth is a ball, I'm in. Just show me one proof. Everyone says there's thousands. No, there's millions of proofs. I'm like, okay, can you show me one? And to date, nobody has. So I understand his unwillingness to look. And there's lots of people out there, but there's people that are invested in the ball Earth alien model, and they refuse to look for that reason. And there's other people that are just indoctrinated and very intelligent people that will refuse to look because it changes their entire reality, and they're not ready for that. Finding out the government is not your friend, is not your parent, is not here to look out for your best interest, is upsetting. And that's why people refuse to look.
We'll give your voice a rest. You're suffering from a bit of laryngitis. So Nick, let's you and I talk a little bit and let David get a drink there. But the sun and moon, Nick, those are things you particularly are focusing on as of late. Tell us a little bit about your discoveries and what you've been thinking about them in relation to the flat Earth world on which we live.
Okay. Well, I think as with many people, having always been kind of fascinated with space, etc., and thinking about it, but never really observing the sun and the moon until Flat Earth came along, and then it's when that huge learning curve when you're brushing up on everything at the same time. You're listening to what the Flat Earthers are saying, and you're trying to kind of compare that with the commonly accepted model, and then trying to get confirmation on that as well. And of course, the only thing you can really do is start looking. And where I am here, every day, I watch the sun and the moon come up from the same place and go over my head in the same fashion. The sun comes up first, and then depending on how far away the moon is, then that comes up later on. And I just watch them go over. And I've got a balcony facing east, and I've got a balcony facing the west. And so it just occurred to me one day to buy some welding mask glass to put over my camera, so I could just see if I could. My original intention was to see if the sun actually got bigger or shrunk as it got further or closer, and that's obviously very, very difficult to observe. But then the day I did that, it's like, oh, there are some sunspots. Great, okay, I'll take a note of the time and where they are. An hour later, look at the sunspots again, still in the same place, coming towards me from the east. And another hour later and another hour later, until midday, those sunspots did not move from, let's say they were at like just for argument's sake, they're the kind of 6 o'clock position. If you imagine the sun as a clock, then they're on the sunspots were on the 6 o'clock position of the sun as it came towards me all throughout the morning. So the moment the sun had gone overhead, then I had to turn around and face west to watch the sun going the other way. And by turning around, those sunspots were then at the 12 o'clock position. So it had appeared as if the sunspots had flipped from the bottom to the top. And I've recorded this over several days, 3-4 separate occasions, and each time you get the same phenomenon. Wherever the sunspots are in the morning, they stay there all morning, and until you have to rotate, and then those sunspots will flip to the opposite side when you're looking from the opposite direction as the sun goes away. And of course, the moon does exactly the same thing. The way I see the moon heading towards me is with the kind of, if you imagine the rabbit in the moon, the rabbit ears are up. It's like a rabbit sitting up as it comes towards me in the east, and then as it goes over my head, the whole thing is flipped upside down. And okay, you could say that that's normal on the heliocentric model, but basically both, the sun and the moon, appear to be doing exactly the same thing, heading towards me, and the markings on them flipping over as I'm watching them disappear to the west. Then I went to the UK and deliberately, made an attempt to observe sunspots from the UK and the moon. And what you get is the sunspots throughout the morning were rotating in a clockwise direction. So they'd start at, say, a 7 o'clock position on the sun, and as the hours went by, I'd see these sunspots moving clockwise, appearing to move clockwise across the sun. And the moon does exactly the same thing when observed from the north. So, to me, first of all, this says that the sun and the moon are doing exactly the same thing, which fits completely with the flat Earth model of them rotating, and basically, if I'm on the equator here or near the equator, they're both going directly over my head. If I'm in the UK, I'm watching the sunrise from the southeast and do an arc in front of me and head off and set in the southwest. It never actually goes over your head. So that tells me that it's a local. The sun and the moon are both local. So how can we have one that's supposed to be rotating around us every month, and the other one we're supposed to be rotating around that? One's 250,000 miles away, the other one's 93 million miles away, but they both behave in exactly the same way. So to me, that was confirmation. That was my own observation and confirmation that the flat Earth model, it fits, it works. And now I've been coordinating with a guy called Bo in California, and he's been recording the sun and the moon and seeing exactly the same phenomenon. Because he's in the northern hemisphere, he's seeing sunspots rotate, and he's seeing the moon rotate in the same fashion. So it's only on the equator when it goes directly over and appears to flip. So there you go. Some people comment and they say, "Whoa, this is the smoking gun," and I think it is, because it's that one thing that's one of the only ways you can really observe what the sun's doing.
And you don't need much to observe it. We would encourage Thomas Sheridan to do the same. He has a telescope. He spoke of it. It doesn't cost you much to do so. You could probably use a good zoom camera to do so, or a telescope like he has, depending, and find these things out for yourself. And doing that sort of observation, well, that's the way you really get to see the world that you live in, as opposed to just living with fear in mind. Nick Davies from Thailand is here. David Weiss and I will be back in a moment on Talk Network and Truth is Stranger Than Lies. It's Truth is Stranger Than Lies with David Weiss and me, Patricia Steere. And we're talking with Nick Davies, a Phuket word. Yes, Phuketword. And he's out of Phuket, Thailand. And Phuket Word is the name of his YouTube channel. And Nick and David, we've been talking a little bit about the moon and the sun. And David, you've got some good points that we were talking about during the break, something the Morgile came up with that you were discussing about the moon and how it really could be a key to breaking this whole thing wide open.
It's a little difficult to explain on the radio, but I'll do my best. If you think about where the moon is going around the ball Earth, when it's in between the Earth and the Sun, that's for about half the month, and therefore the moon would not be visible in the sky at nighttime for about 14 days or so. To the entire spinning globe, which doesn't happen. So, and then it would in the same thing when it's on the daylight side. I mean, on the nighttime side of the sun, on the opposite side of the Earth from the sun, you wouldn't see it during the day at all. But that's a little harder to look at because sometimes you just can't see it because the sky is so bright.
And the Morgile on YouTube has an explanation and a video on that, I would imagine. Is that correct? I've not yet seen it. He's referring to this as the Morgile effect.
Correct.
Which is great, actually. Hey, flat Earth is it's not a new thing. It's been around for quite a long time, but recently has become quite the news story. And hey, we might as well name these varying things after the people who've kind of thought of them or rethought of them. Who knows? So, Nick, what effect are you going to be the one responsible for?
I've already coined it, noticing that, when you're away from the equator, that it clocks around the sun versus flipping at the equator. We call it the Phuket effect. Phuket, the Earth is flat.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay, I'm down. Put me in the annals of history there with that one, yeah.
Another aspect with the moon, while I can still talk, is when you look at the moon from the northern hemisphere and you could see star constellations behind it. Let's say you could see Virgo or whatever, I'm not sure, whatever constellation is behind the moon. It turns out that if you're in the southern hemisphere looking at the moon from the other angle, you see the same constellation behind it. Now, if the moon was at the distance they say it is, and the stars were at, the incomprehensible distances past that, there would be the parallax effect, and you would be seeing completely different constellations, but we don't. So that there proves that the moon and the stars are local to the flat Earth.
While we continue exploring all of these things as flat earthers, we are laughed at by those who refuse to look at this. And they say that we don't do real science, like you mentioned earlier, David, that we, learn everything on YouTube. And what is YouTube? It's just nothing. And we're laughed at. But the real science, the scientific method is what people are using, testing and retesting when it comes to the flat Earth. We're learning things all over from scratch, and it's really a beautiful thing. David?
The truth about YouTube is you can get a better education than any university globally on YouTube. I call it YouTube University. You just need somebody to set up a curriculum, and then as you explore, let's say you're exploring mathematics. Well, you know what? There's more stuff on mathematics, sacred geometry, vortex mathematics, and you could veer off onto the things that interest your soul, and you can get an amazing education on YouTube with just a little bit of guidance.
It would be great for homeschoolers as well to expose their children to the wild and maybe sometimes wacky world of YouTube, as opposed to the books that that they are recommended. Nick?
Yeah, I just recall watching a documentary about a guy in India who decided to install a couple of computers in these walls in a slum, and just left the kids to it. And came back like 3 months later and asked the kids what they'd learned, and they said, "Oh, nothing much, but we know this and that about particle physics."
Wow.
Yeah.
Right. Those kids, they didn't even know what a computer was, and they left no instructions, and they figured out like amazing things.
That's it. Basically, that's the thing. Your point exactly, David. If someone has the willingness to learn, they will learn. And of course, that's what's totally wrong with the whole school system. Is I'm sure we can all remember wanting to choose subjects that we were interested in, but we couldn't because of certain schedule restrictions or numbers or whatever. And that's what's entirely wrong with the whole system. Is why are we not evaluating people for what they are good at and pushing them to excel at the things that interest them?
If you question the proposed teachings, you fail. If you question it, so that there now are kids that are giving the answer that they're required to give, and then writing what they really think underneath that answer.
Interesting. I mean, I don't have children, but if I did, I would encourage my children to have their own views and speak out as much as they could in class. But, in order to get ahead in society we currently live in, unless you're part of like the free man movement or something, you've got to take those tests. You've got to pass those tests as a child. You've got to learn the curriculum that they give us and parrot the answers that they want. And if not, you can be reprimanded, suspended. Even the parents could probably be in some kind of maybe even legal trouble. So the system is set up so that we all end up falling prey to organizations like NASA and believe the things that they tell us. It's very, very sad.
NASA, every time they're talking live to the guys on the International Space Station, they're having all sorts of audio problems, delays, video fuzzing out, which doesn't happen in a digital age. But meanwhile, we're separated by half of the United States from each other. Nick is on the other side of the planet on our little home internet connections, and we have, even though you guys are only hearing audio, we have perfect pictures of each other, and we can hear each other perfectly. But NASA can't, and that's how far, how many miles away is that? I mean, the space station's only 250 miles away, and you're on the other side of this spinning ball planet. It's a joke.
And the astronauts are, feeding their propaganda to students. They have this thing set up where when they fly over certain schools, that there's an opportunity for the astronauts to be engaged by the children, and the children ask them questions live. And the whole thing is really, really sad. I don't know where the astronauts really are, some kind of underground bunker. I mean, that sounds very conspiratorial, but they've got to be somewhere where they're hidden away. So I'm thinking underground bunker. And, for filming purposes. And meanwhile, there's these innocent kids who will swear as they get older that they spoke to astronauts who were flying above Earth because it's personal to them now. They've heard the astronaut's voice speaking to them, answering their question. It's really the worst kind of propaganda.
It is a tough one, though, isn't it? Because, obviously there are videos of people watching a light go across the sky at the time that the ISS is supposed to be there. So,
I've seen it twice.
Okay. So how do you debunk that?
It's very easy, to me at least. When we look up in the sky, if we're not looking through a NASA telescope, we see lights. We see stars, they're lights. We see planets, wandering stars, they're lights. We see satellites, which are wandering lights. We don't see satellites, we see lights. I see, when I saw the space station fly by about a month or so ago, I saw it 2 days in a row actually, and it was a bright, self-illuminating light. It's an illuminary in the sky, whatever those are. So, I believe I used to laugh at astrology. That's a joke. Astronomy is the science. Astrology is a joke. How can where a rock is in space affect your life? That's not the case at all. I mean, all of these illuminated objects up there affect our reality. And if you don't believe me, how do you feel on a bright sunny day versus an overcast cloudy day? How about your mood changes with the moon? All of these things affect everything about us, and we just don't understand how it works.
So do you think that the ISS, the space station up there, is actually a natural or created body of light that NASA's people kind of figured out was there and just decided to tie to the ISS mentally and just say that is what it is, when in reality, obviously, it's nothing?
I believe that they use that as the cover for what, saying, hey, that's the ISS. We have all these other satellites.
But why hasn't somebody in the past said, wait a minute, before the ISS was up there, I remember back in we have in 1800, we have record of this object going.
How are you going to prove it where it was? You saw something fly by, you saw a meteor, you saw, how many people have seen Halley's Comet? What is Halley's Comet? I really...
They know we don't know, and they take advantage of our lack of knowledge. Right. That's the crazy thing.
And other people have pointed this out, but I'll just bring it up again for those of you that haven't really thought of it. If you look at a 747 at cruising altitude, about 5 miles up, it's a tiny little dot in the sky. You could barely see it. But if it was twice that height, you would never see it, right? Well, the space station is about the same size, and it's 25 times high as up. And we see this bright light, it's bigger than what a jet looks like at altitude. And then we're also supposed to believe that we could see a satellite, which is smaller, the size of a car, give or take, maybe the size of a bus. And we're able to see these things also. Impossible.
Nick Davies is here with us. Nick, have you seen anything like that in the sky? Any of these things that they tell us are up there? Have you seen the ISS, the light from the ISS?
I haven't, to be honest. I've not really had that much of a look, but I've looked on YouTube to see if people are seeing it, and they are. So I suspect the same thing as David there, or possibly that they've got aircraft. I mean, there are supposed to be support aircraft for relaying the signals anyway. So there are things up there.
Download, if you're anyone that has a smartphone, download the ISS tracking app. And check it out yourself. Look at it. Try to catch it in the telescope. You'll see that it's not a man-made object reflecting sunlight. It's not. It's self-illuminated and something else.
And the pictures that they show us of people who have seen it looks like it's got the solar panels and all that. So those are fake, and those are passed around, and people write them off as real. Well, we'll be back for our final segments here on Truth is Stranger Than Lies on Talk Network in just a moment. The final segment of our show. Truth is Stranger Than Lies on Talk Network. It's Patricia Steere and David Weiss and Nick Davies from Phuket, Thailand with us. And Phuket Word is the name of his YouTube channel. That's PHUKETWORD on YouTube. He's got a lot of great videos. I encourage you to subscribe and take a look. Nick has been thinking a lot about a timetable in the sky. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, Nick?
All right. Well, obviously, I did a fair bit of research into how the whole idea of gravity, relativity came about, and how the heliocentric model was established. And so, looking back at Newton and Galileo and all these and Kepler, etc., all the people involved in creating the model that we currently have. And, considering the kind of global control system that we're under, I mean, what we have, if you look at the time zones on your average rectangular map, you'll see that they kind of go down, but then they get jagged and basically, from north to south, you should have countries on the same timeline. But in the southern hemisphere, they veer off to one side. But as soon as you turn that rectangular map into a circle, you get these nice, neat segments of time zones. And kind of occurred to me that we've got this global timetable established. Now, really, you should have, if it's midday for you, the sun should be directly over your head. That should be your midday, or at least it's zenith in the sky wherever you are. It should be at its apex point at midday for you. But then you get, as these time zones get artificially inserted, you get the sun overhead in Africa when it's 1 o'clock or something like that. So this artificial construct of time has been put upon us. I remember Matt Powland mentioning that the whole Dateline thing about Russia and America being right next to each other, but on completely different days and purely for trade. And so if you take that idea a bit further and knowing after a bit of research that Newton and his other buddies, they were Masons, they were into the occult, and they were also founding members of the East India Company, the big traders that went around the world and established their global trade networks. And, at the time there was, I can't remember the day, but there was basically a big, massive stock market crash at that time. In which these bankers, Newton was a banker. He was in charge of the Royal Mint for several years. He was an accountant and a mathematician. He wasn't a scientist. But we don't hear about that part of his life. And that's probably why he got knighted, because he was able to really do things with the country's money. So it occurred to me that what they'd done is. This whole idea of a globe or a circle is you've got a choice. If you look at the sun or the moon, you could say the moon is at the center of our everything goes around the moon, and you could still get your months and your 12 months a year and have your year. Based on 27 to 29 days. But after looking at all that, and if I was them in that situation and I wanted to create a timetable, then I would say, well, look, we've got the seasons, and that gives us a year, and that's about 365 days. So let's just round that off to 360. That gives us a circle. And 360 degrees can be divided up into 12 months or 12 sections of 30 days each. And this then fits perfectly for making your timetable. And then this is how you get your geometry. They talk about geometry being created as a mathematical way of describing the globe. But it's just an imaginary way of describing the timekeeping. So you have the movements of the planets and the moon and the sun have been recorded for thousands and thousands of years. And of course, Newton and his buddies were the first people from the West to be going out to across the seas to meet these astronomers from far off lands. And they were bringing back this knowledge that people in the UK or Europe just probably didn't know. So they came back with reams and reams of data of times and locations of stars or wandering stars in the sky. So from that, in the mathematician's mind, you can then you can envisage this secular movement or schedule. You know that the planets are going to appear at a certain time and place, and but that's it. When it comes down to distances and size, once you have that knowledge of when and where a certain celestial body is going to appear, you can who's to say how fast or how large or how far away that object is traveling in order to get round back to its position, whether it's a year or a year and a half or 10 years. Well, of course, the Mars, Jupiter, Venus, etc. And the Moon, they all have their own schedules. There's no tight schedule that we can actually put them all into. So whether you put the Earth at the center, the Moon at the center, or the Sun at the center of your model, your timekeeping model, there is no real difference. You still end up with generally the same result. It just depends which one you pick. So they decided to go with the sun and the seasons to create a year, 365 days, round it off to 360, get your circle, you can neatly divide it up. That was, to me, that was it was a moment where I got kind of cold shivers, and a moment, it felt like a moment of clarity. It's like, wow, that's what they did. That's how they established this globe idea.
But the question is, why did they decide to do this? What are they hiding? Do you believe they're hiding a creator, God, some force like that? That's why they decided to fool us all of this time?
Well, ultimately, in the heliocentric model, the Big Bang, evolution, etc., all accidental, the creator is God. The creator is gravity. The creator or the God of this atheistic heliocentric model is gravity. So it's a religion, as much as any other.
Gravity, if you replace the word gravity in their descriptions with the word God, it makes a lot more sense. It's still a little bit overwhelming, like, wow, can God really do that? But using the word gravity is ridiculous.
So hiding God, that's what all of this is about. There's a clockwork in the sky that actually shows us everything. It just all depends on how they've taught you to look at it.
And hiding God is because they want to maintain control. Because if people realize that there is a God and that they are the powerful spiritual beings that they truly are, and that we manifest our own reality, that'll screw up everything. They need us to stay in a low vibration of fear to create the reality that they want, and to control us.
Well, bringing it all back to Thomas Sheridan, what are his beliefs? Do either one of you know? I know that he speaks out against psychopaths and sociopaths, and so he's against that sort of evil aspect. Atheism, I mean, where does his? I know he believes a lot in the natural world. Gaia, he mentions in his work. What are his religious beliefs? Not that you have to be a religion. I don't mean that, but what does he believe in?
Yeah, he's looking back at some of his broadcasts. He's a pagan. So yes, he and in a way, I think I'm similar. I think I tend to agree with that. Why are we looking up when we obviously, to me, it's obvious that we come from the earth. Mother Earth. It makes complete sense. That's I'd agree with him there that getting back to nature and respecting nature and appreciating nature is a form of religious worship. So that's as far as he claims his religion is, from what he's said himself, that it's paganistic and all good. But again, it comes back down to his thing about it all being circular because of breasts and nipples and ovaries. Yeah.
It would seem like he would be able to take his beliefs, pagan as they may be, and sort of extrapolate that to be about the way the moon and the sun, how everything works so perfectly. It works perfectly on a flat Earth, and he only knows that it works perfectly on a ball Earth. And it's just, he needs to just almost like take off a pair of glasses that aren't working anymore and put on another pair of glasses so that he can see better. He's like close on so much, but yet so far away, and it's so frustrating listening to him. You just want to scream, but but you can't. You won't even enable comments.
Isn't that the thing with a lot of the flat earthers out there? Is that when the flat Earth comes along, it all falls into place. It's like, oh yes, this is the big one. This is the one that makes it all make, because after people like, InfoWars, Alex Jones, David Icke and all that, what's next? And then, flat Earth comes along. Okay, it's okay. This is something to really chew on and
flat step. Flat, I thought I was like, wow, I've discovered a lot of stuff. There can't be much more. And then I discovered flat Earth, and, it rocked my world. Thank God the world is stable and doesn't move. And it's mind blowing, and Sheridan and other, people that refuse to look in it accuse us of making up stuff and not looking at science. And that's the opposite of the truth. Everything in his video, he's just like, it's a Russian plot and they're controlled. And, and he's saying all of these things that have absolutely no truth, support, or evidence in any way.
Yeah, it's as if he believes that we're all being controlled and paid, and then we're very gullible and not very bright, and we're being led to some sort of way in which we will kill each other or other people. Kill each other, or I don't know what he's saying, but what he's saying isn't that anything great's going to happen from this movement. That's for sure. He's encouraging people to get out of it.
I encourage the Kremlin or whoever's in charge over there to send us our checks, to reach out at info@deepinsidetherabbithole.com, and we'll give you our mailing addresses.
Yes.
Tricia, we have to wrap it up.
It's been fantastic. Nick Davies and Phuket World. Anything new that you've got coming up on your channel, on YouTube, that you're going to be looking into? I know you're always doing videos. Anything new coming up?
Definitely going to. I'm in the middle of making this video that shows us that the sun and the moon being exactly the same, and I'm hoping that that will be a smoking gun for a lot of people.
Fantastic. We'll call it the Nick Davies effect. All right, we will be back at another time at the same place, though. It's Talk Network, and this has been Truth is Stranger Than Lies.
Supposition that what we're taught is true, and it all fits and it all works to the heliocentric model, then you can understand when someone comes along and says, "Well, hang on a minute, you can look at it this way as well." I think that was the first step. Is the first thing you see once you start looking at it is, wow, you can look at this in a number of different ways, and you still get the same results. So, as Brian Cox once famously said, it's only because you're told that you're on a globe that you believe it, and because there's nothing else around us, or everything around us can say so many things, can be interpreted in so many ways, and I think that's the one thing I'd love to see in these people that come along, and even if they could just say, "Well, yeah, that's interesting. You could say that we orbit them." I haven't interacted much with Facebook as far as Flat Earth goes, but just on YouTube, and I suppose like most people, you spend a lot of time listening to what the different things people have to say, and then started trying out some of these things myself. I suppose it wasn't a case of trying to debunk the Flat Earth. It was a case of trying to see if what the Flat Earthers were saying had any validity, and started looking at the horizons.
I want to make a comment on that. A lot of people that are hearing about Flat Earth for the first time, and they're like, "Oh, you heard it on YouTube," but they're debunkers out there. Their favorite argument is, "Oh, you heard it on YouTube. Oh, it must be true." Well, the truth about YouTube is everything is on YouTube. Everything real, everything fake, and everything in between. So, it's just like reality.
People seldom go to the trouble of scratching the surface of things to find the inner truth.
You're here because you know something, that there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there.
Truth is stranger than lies. From deep inside the rabbit hole, here's your host, David Weiss.
And I'm Patricia Steere. Welcome to Truth is Stranger Than Lies. We have a special guest and a couple of special topics today. Our guest, David Weiss and I, is Nick Davies. He's originally from the UK, and he now lives in Phuket, Thailand. He has a YouTube channel called Phuket Word and a website, phuketword.com. And Nick, thanks for being here with us from Thailand.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Well, I do want to let everyone know that David Weiss, Next is his middle name, for those in the know, is suffering a bit from some laryngitis today. So there may be some coughing fits or something happening.
Well, they'll be on mute, but I am here, and I will talk when I can.
Okay, fantastic. All right, Nick, let's find out a little bit more about what got you into the world of Flat Earth. And then I want to discuss a gentleman that all three of us have been listening to on YouTube recently and how that has affected all of us. So Nick, Flat Earth, how did it come into your life?
I suppose like most other people, it was there was one particular YouTube video which kicked it off, followed by a few more recommendations, and that was it. I was just gagging for more every day, and soon enough, I think, like a lot of people that spend time just whether it's YouTube or Facebook.
You have to sort out what's real and what's not real, and it's not about believing, it's about listening and actually using your brain rather than the indoctrination that we've gone through in the indoctrination system that we call school.
Absolutely. It's all about discernment, isn't it? We're all familiar with the comments that people think flat earthers are trashing science or ignoring. Ignorance is the favourite word, or whatever. That's completely untrue. It's more of a case of actually looking properly for the first time, maybe. I know that I never really understood the movements of the moon, for example, until really taking a hard look at it. So I can understand from someone who's defending the globe. You can understand their position, because if they are someone that has examined and observed the moon and the stars with the